I watched my own funeral from the hill behind the church. It was drizzling that morning, just enough to make the air thick enough to blur faces and soak the petals falling from cheap wreaths. My face wasn't in the casket, but my name was etched in silver on the plaque. In loving memory of Ellie Monroe, beloved daughter, sister friend. I wasn't beloved. Not really. And I wasn't dead. Not anymore. I was 25, bruised breathing and very much awake. From where I stood half hidden behind pine branches slick with rain, I could see them all. My mother-in-law by name only, Valerie with her signature black veil and crocodile tears. My half-sister Cassie wore white, of all colors, like she was celebrating. She gave a speech, flawless makeup, trembling voice, perfect performance. Ellie always had this distance about her. She drifted. We tried to reach her, but maybe some souls aren't meant to stay. Lies all of it. I hadn't drifted, I had been pushed to the edge of a cliff by a family who'd always made me feel like I was occupying space they wished was empty. That cliff, it hadn't been symbolic. 2 weeks ago, we were on a family healing retreat in the Berkshires. Valerie said it was to bond again, to mend fences after my father passed and left everything in my name. I should have known better. We went hiking the third morning. It was just me, Cassie, and Valerie. No one else wanted to join. I walked a few paces ahead. Valerie asked me to pose for a photo near the edge. I remember her voice behind me, soft, sweet. Closer, honey, just one more step. Then it all went dark. I woke up to birdsong and pain. My leg was broken, my head throbbed, but I was alive. An older couple, Dean and Liza Cartwright, had found me in a creek bed at the base of the ravine. They didn't call the police, said the storms had taken down the lines. They took me into their cabin, treated my wounds, fed me, gave me space to breathe. It took 4 days before I could sit upright long enough to ask for a mirror. The bruises looked like fingerprints. Back at the church, Cassie's voice cracked just enough for the cameras. She clutched a tissue like an Oscar trophy. She didn't have many friends, but she loved her books, her silence. Translation: she was weird, she was lonely, she was easy to forget. I watched as the pastor opened the floor for final words. No one stepped up, not a single person. That told me everything. I glanced at the parking lot. There it was, Dad's old Mustang. The car he promised would always be mine. Valerie was leaning against it after the service, sipping champagne from a silver thermos, laughing with the estate attorney. Something clenched inside me, sharp, cold, familiar. Valerie wasted no time. Within a week of my death, she'd filed the death certificate. A physician, a family friend, had signed it. No body, no autopsy, just presumed deceased. Accidental fall. And just like that, all the property trust's assets that were tied to Ellie Monroe went into probate. Since I had no spouse or kids, it defaulted to next of kin, Cassie and Valerie. My voice was gone. My rights erased with a forged certificate. They hadn't just let me fall. They buried me in silence. I left the hill quietly that afternoon. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. Dean drove me back to the cabin. Liza wrapped me in a wool blanket, handed me warm cider, and asked just once, "Do you want to go back?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't going back. I was going forward. That night, I pulled out an old notebook from a drawer. Dean handed me a pen. I wrote my first words since the fall. They declared me dead, but I'm going to make them wish I'd stayed buried. I underlined it twice. Then I flipped to a new page and wrote the name, Eleanor Gray. It was time to rise from the dead. The ceiling above me was wood knotty pine, old but polished. I woke to the scent of antiseptic wood smoke and something warm, maybe stew. My leg throbbed with the dull rhythm. I was wrapped in bandages from thigh to toe, and someone had stitched my temple with care. I wasn't dead, and yet the world had already buried me. Liza Cartwright didn't ask many questions. She just fed me, sat with me, and sometimes hummed lullabies to herself when she thought I was asleep. Dean was quieter, a carpenter with hands like stone and eyes like softened steel. He'd found me while checking animal traps after the storm. They didn't know who I was. I didn't tell them. For days, I floated between pain and silence. But on the fourth night, Liza handed me a dusty laptop with satellite internet, just in case, she said. The first thing I searched was my own name, Ellie Monroe. There it was. Obituary. Ellie Monroe. 25. A quiet soul taken too soon in a tragic hiking accident. She will be missed. I read it 10 times. The details were shallow. No autopsy. No memorial fund. Just a 2-paragraph formality with a stock photo of me smiling awkwardly from college. Then I searched the local property register. That's when it hit me like the fall all over again. 5 days after my funeral, Valerie filed a petition to activate my inheritance. 2 days later, the deed to my grandfather's estate, valued at $16 million, was transferred to a trust managed by Valerie and Cassie. On behalf of the surviving family members for the purposes of continued stewardship, they took my death like a business deal, erased me on paper, activated a will, and quietly assumed the life that never belonged to them. I traced back the steps. A physician, Dr. Halberg, certified my death. A close friend of Valerie's. He wasn't even in the Berkshires that weekend. There were no police reports, no formal investigation, no autopsy, only a death certificate manufactured by people who knew the law and how to bend it. And then came the final punch. My father's Mustang, the one I had spent years restoring with him, was listed on an auction site. Starting bid $12,000. The bio said one owner, sentimental value, selling for college fund. Cassie dropped out of college 2 years ago, but she was suddenly enrolled again according to her latest Instagram bio. New wardrobe, new apartment, verified checkmark. Bought with the price of my name. That night I screamed for the first time. Liza didn't stop me. She just brought me a blanket and sat beside me as I shook. When I finally quieted, Dean handed me a cup of tea, then said 4 words. Don't go back weak. I spent the next week rebuilding myself. I shaved my hair, burnt every document with Ellie Monroe on it, ordered a new birth certificate from a friend of Dean's in town, one that named me Eleanor Gray, born in Vermont. I chose that name because it sounded like steel hidden inside softness. For weeks I trained, walked again, worked with Dean in his shed filing wood using my hands. Liza taught me basic herbal medicine. They didn't ask for repayment. You can pay us, Liza whispered one morning, by living better than they ever wanted you to. And I did. I studied every night, online law courses, estate codes, probate loopholes. I researched every piece of property my family had inherited. Turns out my grandfather had invested in multiple holdings, some co-owned with other parties, silent shares, unclaimed bonds. They hadn't taken it all. Not yet. One night I found something that stopped my breath, the original family estate, a 120-acre plot with a Victorian mansion. My name had never been removed from the title. They couldn't touch it yet because it was locked in a pending transfer case. Something about a deed not yet finalized. A clerical delay. That was my in. If I acted quickly, I could legally buy it through a third-party shell name before the probate process was finalized. I smiled. For the first time since the cliff, I felt the ground beneath me wasn't made of betrayal but control. Dean drove me into town the next day. We met with an old friend of his, an attorney named Peter Witt, who worked quietly and asked no questions. You sure you want to do this? He asked, watching me sign the alias. They declared me dead. I said, all I'm doing is acting the part. That night, I returned to the cabin. I stood outside under the stars, the cold air slicing through my sweater. My hands no longer shook. I didn't just want revenge, I wanted silence, the kind that doesn't scream, the kind that suffocates. The next phase wasn't about pain, it was about power. And the first step was reclaiming what they tried to bury with me. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I didn't want it cold. I wanted it clinical, documented, signed in blue ink with notary stamps. I wanted it to hurt not through violence, but through the silence of paperwork, the slow disintegration of control, and the realization that their victim had become their judge. I moved into a small rental unit above an antique bookstore 2 towns away. No one knew me as Ellie Monroe. There were no framed photos, no childhood relics, just a name on a lease. Eleanor Gray, with a freshly issued ID, a P.O. box, and a trail scrubbed clean. By day, I worked part-time as an assistant for a property records attorney, thanks to Peter Witt's referral. By night, I devoured estate law, family trust codes, and the power of anonymity in real estate holdings. My goal wasn't just to punish. It was to erase them the way they tried to erase me. Step 1. Locate the cracks in their empire. I began with my father's business holdings. Valerie had liquidated his investments too early, sold off stocks in a panic after my death. Some of them were co-signed by me before the accident, which meant her sale was illegal unless I was confirmed dead. And they'd done it without a body. Using my new identity and a pseudonymous LLC, I sent a letter of inquiry to the probate court requesting the review of the trust distributions, citing a discrepancy in original ownership authorization. The clock started ticking. Step 2. Reclaim the house. They didn't expect me to notice the family's ancestral home. The 120-acre estate my grandfather left, in memory of his bloodline, had a pending title issue. Valerie hadn't resolved yet. The reason it had been left jointly to Ellie Monroe, or surviving heirs. But the OR wasn't settled because my name hadn't officially been revoked due to the lack of a court-declared death. And that was the opening. Through Peter and a shell company registered as North Ashwood Holdings, I made an anonymous cash offer. They accepted it immediately, thinking it was some Boston investor building a winery. I wired the money that week, and just like that, I became the legal owner of the house they had been waiting to inherit. I visited it the next morning alone at dawn. The gates still creaked the way they did when Dad and I used to sneak out for early fishing trips. The ivy still curled around the old stone columns like it was protecting something sacred. Inside, dust blanketed everything. But it wasn't emptiness I felt, it was justice reclaiming its roots. Step 3. Undermine them socially, quietly. I didn't need a press release or dramatic reveal. What I needed was doubt to fester inside them. I created anonymous social profiles, slipped photos to local reporters, Valerie sipping champagne at my funeral, Cassie grinning at a celebration of life event at a country club days later. I leaked financial inconsistencies in the family foundation's tax filings to a watchdog blog. Then, using Eleanor's account, I posed as a former associate and sent Valerie a message. Some ghosts don't haunt, they investigate. She blocked me, but 3 days later, she canceled an event and hired a forensic accountant. Good, let her feel hunted. Step 4. Take back the name and erase it. I filed a legal motion through Peter to contest the issuance of my death certificate under seal citing fraud and misrepresentation. The court accepted the petition. Valerie was served a notice of hearing. Within 10 days, her attorney was blindsided. Peter didn't mention me by name, only that a surviving individual with legal standing was contesting the legitimacy of the death claim. It was enough to trigger panic. Cassie made her Instagram private. Valerie pulled 3 properties off the market. The local paper ran a tiny piece titled, "Inheritance Dispute Reopens Old Family Wounds in the Monroe Legacy." The game had begun, but even I didn't expect what came next. Late one night, I received a call from an unlisted number. Ellie, a voice whispered, "Is that really you?" It was Tessa, my childhood friend, the only one who ever believed in me back when I was a shadow in my own home. I saw the article. They're freaking out. Valerie's been calling old contacts, trying to scrub everything. And Cassie, she said something weird yesterday. She said she thinks you're alive. I replied, but they don't get to see that version of me, not yet. The next day, I left a letter at the family's front door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photo, Valerie at the funeral. Cassie in white, and me standing on the hill in the background, out of focus, but unmistakably there. Closing beat. No longer the girl they buried. The final shot of this chapter. Ellie, now fully Eleanor, walking through the halls of her reclaimed estate, heels clicking against old marble. She runs her hand across the mantel, pauses in front of a portrait of her grandfather, and whispers, "You gave them your name, I gave them time, now I'm taking both back." A flick of the wrist, a lighter, and the fake obituary curls into ash. The day arrived with the smell of rain and headlines. Monroe Legacy Estates. The grand project Valerie had been grooming for years was finally ready for its ribbon-cutting ceremony. Press invites had been sent to every major outlet in Massachusetts. The guest list included local politicians, investors, socialites, and media darlings. All of them thought they were attending the celebration of a family's rise. They had no idea they were walking into its downfall. Valerie stood at the center of it all. Her signature power red suit tailored to perfection, flanked by Cassie in an elegant beige dress. All smiles, all confidence. Behind them, a 12-foot banner waved in the breeze. The Monroe Legacy, honoring the past, building the future. Cassie posed for photos with a fake humility that made my teeth grind. "It's what Ellie would have wanted," she told a reporter, dabbing fake tears. "We've carried her memory in every brick." I stood in the crowd, 4 rows back, sunglasses on heels planted like daggers into the earth. They didn't see me, not yet. The MC stepped forward, introduced Valerie. Applause cameras clicked. She launched into her speech with the polish of a seasoned manipulator. "This estate has been a labor of love. We are proud to continue the Monroe legacy, one that began with vision, discipline, and family unity." Unity. I nearly laughed. My fingers curled around the envelope in my clutch. Inside, copies of the forged death certificate, the original trust revisions, and the sealed court documents that had just declared that Ellie Monroe was in fact alive, and the legal heir to the Monroe estate. The MC interrupted with one final announcement. "We are honored today to be joined by our silent investor whose generosity made this development possible. Please welcome Miss Eleanor Gray. Gasps swept through the crowd. Valerie's smile faltered. Cassie's face dropped. She turned confused. A beat passed. Then I stepped forward. I walked toward the stage like I'd rehearsed it in my mind 1,000 times because I had. Each step felt like retribution in motion. I took the mic, looked directly into the crowd. Thank you. I'm not here to make a speech about investment. I'm here because legacies deserve to be truthful. And today, some truths are long overdue. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. Valerie whispered something to Cassie. Her hands were shaking. I opened the envelope and held up a document. This is the death certificate signed on July 17th of last year. It claims that Ellie Monroe died in a hiking accident. I let it hang in the air. There was no autopsy, no body, no investigation. Only signatures from a family desperate to fast-track an inheritance. People gasped. Journalists started recording. I held up the second paper. Here is a notarized reversal from a federal judge confirming that Ellie Monroe never legally died, that her identity was stolen, her inheritance hijacked, her memory exploited. Valerie's voice cracked out desperate. This is absurd. Who even are you? I turned to her, slowly removed my sunglasses. The crowd froze. I'm the girl you declared dead, and I just bought the land you're standing on. Silence. A scream echoed not from Valerie, but from Cassie, who dropped her champagne glass in horror. I didn't flinch. You buried me in paperwork, so I resurrected with paperwork. You built this place on a grave. Now I own the tombstone and the deed it's printed on. I handed the documents to the journalist beside me. You wanted legacy. Now here's your real one. Forged death certificates, fraudulent probate filings, and an empire built on lies. Panic spread. Some guests started to leave. A lawyer in the crowd whispered into his phone. Valerie collapsed into a chair, white as plaster. Cassie stormed off stage. I turned back to the mic. This isn't revenge. This is correction. You stole my silence. I reclaimed my voice. The ribbon was never cut. Instead, the banner came crashing down when a gust of wind tore its fasteners loose. It fluttered to the ground, dragging the words, honoring the past, into the mud. Fitting. Later that night, the story broke. Heiress returns from presumed death, exposes family fraud at launch event. The footage went viral. Social media dubbed me the ghost investor. Hashtags trended. Ellie returns inheritance. Revenge buried but not gone. And Valerie indicted for falsifying legal documents within 48 hours. Cassie dropped by every brand deal. The Monroe name, now synonymous with betrayal. The estate was quiet now. No more media vans outside, no more reporters knocking on doors, no more Valerie, no more Cassie. Just the creak of old floorboards, the soft hiss of wind through the trees, and the slow, steady breath of a woman who had once been declared dead. It took 3 weeks for the court to finalize what the world already knew. The forged death certificate was annulled. All assets were restored to the original heir, Ellie Monroe, but Ellie no longer existed in the public eye. The name remained on paper, but the woman behind it, she had evolved. I kept my legal identity because power lives in names. But in life, in truth, I was Eleanor Gray, the version of me who had survived, the version who had fought, the version who refused to be buried again. Valerie accepted a plea deal, 2 years of probation, massive fines, and public disgrace. Cassie tried to rebuild her influencer brand until screenshots of her grief party and property sales surfaced. Her sponsors dropped her within hours. Last I heard, she moved to Arizona under a different name, but none of that mattered. I wasn't tracking their pain. I had stopped needing their destruction. Their absence was revenge enough. One afternoon, I received a letter handwritten, no return address. I recognized the slant of the cursive before I even opened it. Ellie, they will say you were cruel, that you humiliated us, but we both know you gave us more than we ever gave you a chance to come clean. I hope you find what you're looking for, Cassie. No apology, no accountability, just a line drawn in the sand. I didn't write back. Some graves are meant to stay closed. Instead, I turned my focus to the house. The estate was massive, too massive for just me, so I converted it. Room by room, I opened its doors, not to tourists or tenants, but to women like me. Girls who'd been abandoned, used, erased by families that saw them as inconvenient. I built a quiet sanctuary, no signs, no ads, just a whisper network of safety. We called it the Gray House, because sometimes you don't need to return in white armor. Sometimes surviving in gray is enough. Tessa, my childhood friend, came to visit one night. She brought wine and old photos she'd saved. You look different, she said, smiling. I am different, I answered. We sat on the porch, watching dusk melt into starlight. So was it worth it, she asked? I thought for a long moment before answering. It wasn't revenge I wanted, Tess. It was proof. Proof that I existed, that I mattered. that I wasn't just a name to be erased with ink and lies. Later, after she left, I walked the halls alone. I passed the room that had once been my father's study, the place where Valerie signed away my legacy with a forged signature. I opened the door. It was empty now, clean still. I stepped inside and whispered, "You can keep the Monroe name. I've built something better without it."